Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back. We were on a 2 week break, but we're here now with episode 12 of the Emotional Bankroll podcast, a series where I interview high stakes DFS players about the mental health and lifestyle of playing DFS at such a high level. Now, you may have the financial means to go pro, but do you have the emotional bankroll to deal with the highs and lows? Hey, I'm Brian Jester, and in this episode, I chat with Coby DuBose, who you may know as TigerPawsSC on DraftKings. And Coby has such an interesting story. He self-excluded from DraftKings from 2016 to 2021 to focus on his personal life and his career as a criminal defense lawyer, which, by the way, he defends people on death row sometimes. And then, after his self-exclusion, came back and started crushing DFS last year to the tune of $500,000 plus in PGA DFS wins since late last season. I mean, it's crazy. I chatted with Coby about why he chose to self-exclude in the first place, how hard it was to get back on that bike and start playing PGA DFS once again, his unusual way of growing his bankroll, and it involves a story with a high stakes pro that you may know, why he has such an ultra aggressive approach, and why he exclusively plays PGA DFS, and then the mental roller coaster of having a day job where literally every day people's futures are in your hands when you go to work. It's a great interview. I think you'll love it. If you enjoy it, make sure you're subscribed, whether it's in your favorite podcast app or here on YouTube. That way you never miss a future interview. And give us a thumbs up or a 5-star rating and review to let us know that you enjoyed it. Now to the show. All right, let's talk to Coby. Coby, what's up, man? I know it's been a crazy couple of weeks for you. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to chat with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to chatting with you. Big fan of the podcast. I've listened to it before, so when you reached out, I was excited to be a part of it.
Love to hear that, as always. So let's just start with saying that you are a criminal defense lawyer by day, a high-stakes golf DFS player by night, who just returned from a 5-year self-exclusion on DraftKings. It's a lot to unpack there, and we'll dive into each area individually. But let's first start with your DFS background. When and how did you get into DFS?
Sure. Like most, I came through college 2004 to 2008. That was during the party poker / Bodog, pre-Bovada days of poker and sports betting, kind of the Wild West, and you could do what you wanted. Things changed and it became harder to bet on sports. Obviously, we've all seen the changes in the poker world. So I was kind of in that space, and then obviously DFS emerged a little bit after that. I originally played on Draft Street, I guess, like a lot of people. I hadn't thought about Draft Street in a while, but when I was looking at this, I remembered that they existed. I played a lot of, at the time, cash games in baseball. Was kind of where I got my start. I had worked in baseball for the Mets organization for a little while, so I fancied myself, kind of one of the new sabermetrics geeks back in the day. I thought I could use that, and I played a lot of high stakes cash games, not a ton of GPPs or tournaments, stuff like that. That was my introduction to this. Golf came a little bit later. I guess, and I haven't played baseball in quite a while, so that's something to think about. It's been quite a while since I've done that.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, because I see you now pretty much exclusively play PGA DFS. What draws you to golf now, and why don't you venture back into baseball or into other sports?
Yeah, and I think we'll discuss a little bit of this a little bit later when we talk about why I self-excluded. But, baseball is just such a commitment, a time commitment. It's such a long season. It's all day, every day, 180, 162 games, but that stretches out to 180 or 90 days from noon to midnight, and it was such a emotional and time commitment. It's just really hard for me. If I'm going to do something, I want to play all the slates. I want to really dive into it. I want to be as much of an expert as I can. Golf, to me, it works well with my schedule. It happens during the day. I don't have to be on a Friday night when my wife wants to go out to dinner. I don't have to, I'm not sweating the games. I'm not, all that stuff is over by 5 or 6 o'clock unless we're playing on the West Coast. Golf is a big part of my life. I don't know. I've been a golfer. I've grown up a golfer. I'm a good golfer. I play a lot. As you get older, that's kind of the only time that we can compete. There are no more competitive football games like we had in high school, right? So it's one of the places where I still compete. And golf's been just pretty important. So watching golf, being in the golf space, listening to golf, it doesn't feel quite as much like work because I like it and I care about it. And I've found some edges as well, I think, in golf that maybe don't exist in other sports, at least for my approach.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing to a lot of people that come on the show. They talk about where their edges lie and maximizing those edges and not necessarily having to play other sports, especially if you don't see those edges. And so, talking about your play before the self exclusion, maybe after the draft street days, but I see some Roto Grinder
Sure.
results from 2015, 2016. But what I saw was mostly low stakes, large field tournaments, and maybe that's just
Sure.
Roto Grinders reporting. But what was your initial DFS bankroll, and how would you describe your play before your self exclusion in 2016?
Yeah. So, I was just pretty casual. After kind of the draft street baseball days, I would play some cash games in baseball, $1,000, $2,000 level, which was, pretty big cash games at the time. But I wasn't very serious about tournaments either in baseball or in golf. I did it mostly, oh, okay, the Masters is rolling around. Let's throw in a few in the Millie Maker because this seems interesting. And it was kind of just a way to dip my toe into it. I didn't take it seriously at all. I remember one time I was sixth going into Sunday in the Millie Maker, the PGA Championship, I think in 2015, and that was the first time I went, oh, okay, maybe I could do this. It planted something in my brain, but I found it exciting. But it was really just more for fun, very very casual back then in terms of golf. Now baseball, I still was playing, and Roto Grinders probably doesn't pick up on this, but the cash game stuff, I was pretty deep into that, and I was my original bankroll. I don't think I managed it well, and it's part of what led to my self-exclusion. I would put in $500, and I would play a $500 cash game or $530 cash game. I'd win $1,000 out of it. I'd redeposit 60, and I'd play a 1060 cash game. I'd win that. I'd redeposit 120 and play a 2120 cash game. Oh no, I lost that. I went 66%. Now I have no money. Looking back, really stupid, right? But the idea was, man, if I can just keep beating people, I'll have $1 million one day. I'm gonna lose eventually, So that's kind of how I played before I self-excluded. When you combine just how exhausting and how totally comprehensive baseball is, with not really having a good handle on what I wanted to accomplish through DFS, other than let's just try to go on an insane heater and build up an unsustainable bankroll through a series of wins. That's kind of what led me to go, okay, is this really something that's positive? Am I in control enough to do this without harming my life? Which, I'm sure we'll talk about more, but that's kind of where I was. And it didn't involve golf really at all, which is kind of interesting where we are now.
That is super interesting, and it's kind of the opposite of the martingale effect, where you're just doubling down no matter what the result is. Super,
That's right.
super sustainable approach long term for sure. So, all right, let's talk about this self exclusion since we've hinted at it a couple times. Because I mean, self exclusion to me is such a tough concept to wrap my mind around. Because once you click that button, you can't access DraftKings until that self-exclusion expires. So, I mean, first of all, that requires a ton of personal awareness and discipline. So let's dive into it. What led to your self-exclusion? And you selected 5 years, so you literally could not play for 5 years. Why that length of time?
Yeah, so when you self-exclude, right, you have options. You can do it for a year, you can do it for 5, you can do it for a lifetime. And I thought back at the time, 5 years. There was a reason for it. It wasn't random. I thought about it a lot. I look back to the date that I self-excluded. I think it was like September 26th of 2016. And if you think of what September 26th is on a baseball schedule, that's pretty close to the end of it, and it was after a long season of highs, lows, wins, a lot of time just spent. At the time, I graduated law school in 2013. Was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I spent some time, I wanted to be a public defender at the time, and then I ended up, those jobs are really hard to come by in any good markets. They didn't pay enough. So it was trying to figure out how I'm going to get into the criminal defense world in a way that would pay me good money. And DFS was a way to make money, but it was such a time commitment. And I had a very serious girlfriend that I ended up proposing to in December of that year. I think I looked at it all and I said, hey, if I'm going to get serious about my lawyer career, about this relationship with this person who I'm planning to marry, am I really going to be doing it by spending 12 hours a day grinding out baseball cash games with these huge swings where some months I'm up $20,000 because I've won 6 of these in a row and then giving it all back? It really just wasn't healthy because it didn't come with any sort of plan or any kind of long-term approach. And I looked at it and I thought to myself, I don't think this is compatible with getting my career off the ground. Maybe there will be a time in my life where I'm able to come back to this because it's still something I enjoy, something I like to do. I've always been interested and involved in sports betting, contest games like poker. So I said there may be a different time in my life where I'm better suited to do this, but for now, this is going to hold me back from really being a lawyer, which is what I wanted to be, an effective lawyer. So I said, let's do 5 years. Let's see where I am. And it wasn't quite as hard as I thought. It kind of went cold turkey and it wasn't there. And that's the nice thing about the self-exclusion. There's no way around it, right? You hit that button and it's gone. And it was nice. Baseball season ended. The timing of it was very nice because then you don't really think about it until the next year. And now you're self-excluded and you don't hop back in. So that's the way it worked out.
I mean, it just requires insane self-discipline to be able to do that. Would you say that you have pretty good self-discipline in other or all areas of your life?
I've gotten better at it, and you have to when you're managing, and we'll talk about it a little more. I mean, I'm obviously a criminal defense lawyer, which means I deal with people's problems, their life and death problems every day. And if I have a bad day, people end up in jail, right? And not to say that I don't. Of course, everybody has bad days. Some days are better than others. But it's required me to be more organized, to be more disciplined. Obviously, like anybody, I work on it. I think about a lot, like where are my weaknesses, where are my life leaks, can I be healthier, can I exercise more, can I eat better? But I think over the last 5, 6, 7 years, I've gotten more disciplined and being able to put away DFS and then come back to it and do it in a healthy way has been part of that.
Yeah, and so you say you didn't miss it that much, or at least it's not as much as you thought it would. What was the peak of purely missing DFS? Was there any one point where you're like, wow, I really would love to get back in?
Yeah, I think obviously I said I work for the Mets. So as a Mets fan, the Mets, I guess it's been 5 or 6 years since they made their runs to the World Series and were competitive. I was still invested and involved in baseball emotionally, watching them, and all that went on there. And so there were times where I'm like, God, I'm still putting in plenty of time watching baseball. Why am I not just playing DFS? But as my wife pointed out, like, hey, you're getting to enjoy 2 hours of a baseball game or 3 hours of a baseball game rather than 12 hours of grinding over it and mornings waking up setting lineups and things of that nature. So, I think during baseball season, when it really gets into the exciting part, you're following your team, it piques that interest to want to be there. And then as I got more into golf, which happened over the last 5 years, a lot of people have gotten more into golf. I think it's become much more popular as the majors rolled around, wanting to be a part of the Millie Makers, which I knew were existing because I was still doing a little bit of betting on golf. I'd go to Vegas and do some golf betting on outrights, listen to podcasts where people are talking about doing Millie Makers and wanting to be a part of that because it sounded so fun and remembering what that was like. But, just realizing, okay, I'm self-excluded. There's a reason I did this. We'll see what this looks like in 2021 whenever it rolls around. It's almost like a credit report where you're waiting for some bad thing to fall off 7 years later, and then you'll see what your life looks like. But, so I always kind of had that date in my mind, and then all of a sudden it went, well, shoot, it's here. It's been 5 years. Okay, now what do we want to do, right?
Well, that was my next question is, were you aware of the exact date and were you planning to immediately jump back in once it hit?
I knew that it was September of 2021. I didn't know the exact date. I remember this summer, I guess last summer, before I went back into my email, because, in order to self-exclude, I think I sent an email to DraftKings. There were some emails involved where they send you something with all the details. And I just searched like self-exclusion, DraftKings, like all these different keywords to see if it would pop up in my email. So I pulled the date and I went, oh, okay. And I sent them an email and said, hey, look, I'm thinking about getting back into this whenever this self-exclusion ends. What do I need to do? And they gave me the details and basically said, okay, here's what happens. Your account will just be ready to go when you want it. Just please let us know if we can help you. So, I hadn't planned to jump right in that day, but I was aware of when and the how, and I just wanted to make sure there weren't any weird hoops I needed to jump through in order to, start playing again.
Yeah, and DFS isn't like riding a bike in any manner, right? Because a lot has changed in the 5 years since when you were playing until late last year. So how did you acclimate yourself to the new DFS landscape, and how difficult, if at all, was the adjustment from a playing standpoint?
Sure. Well, now given that I kind of pretty much exclusively do golf, the biggest thing was picking up what tools were out there. 'Cause there's a lot of really nice golf tools, everything from tracking your expected equity during the middle of a contest at a site like Cut Sweats, or, all these lineup builders and optimizers. And strokes gained data and stuff like that. Fortunately, I had kept up with a lot of it because I was in the golf betting space. Now, not every week, not super seriously, but I was betting golf majors. I was betting the Masters. So I kind of knew, okay, who are the podcasters and the Discord channels and the different people to sort of look to, not necessarily for advice every week, but to point me to the tools that I could use to kind of figure this world back out. And it didn't happen immediately. It took a little while to kind of, get my feet wet. But I was familiar enough with the players and, obviously all the tournaments and things like that. It was really just more about the DFS landscape again, and what are people doing? How are they building teams? What are ownership trends like? Things of that nature. But fortunately, I think I picked it up pretty quickly now.
I would say so. I would say so. So you come back, right? And I see you playing, $300 buy-ins, $1,500+ buy-ins, $4,000 buy-ins. Did you start small upon your return, hit something big, and then go from there? Or did you take a chunk of your savings or your income or whatever and deposit that initially?
So it's actually a funny story. I guess we've been talking about how I play golf exclusively, and that is true, except it wasn't. The way I came back was in October, I guess. I love college football. I went to Clemson. Clemson football has been an institution in the last 10 years. And with college football DFS coming back, I said, I just want to dabble in some college football DFS. It'll be on Saturdays again, nothing that'll take me away from work. So I started playing $2,000 cash games against Third and Schlong, who I have discovered now as a pro. I found his New York Times article after. So I beat him. If he listens to this, sorry, pal, like at least 6 or 7 times in a row. I think I went 7-1 against him, playing him once a week all year. And it kind of became a joke between me and my friends. I'd send him the screenshot every Saturday. He took down Third and Schlong again, not even close this week. And I would just cash out my $2,000 profit. And he got me. He nipped me one time in November. But, it was a good run against him. And so that's kind of how I started. And I think I made about $15,000 beating him in head-to-heads. And that built my bankroll. I was prepared to, put in $10,000 or $15,000 to start doing golf. But I was able to build it up doing college football cash games. And then I hit a smaller GPP in October. It was a showdown at the Zozo. I got, I think, second for $5,000. I might have won it. I'm not sure. It was for $5,000. And that kind of built it up. And then the big one, I started playing the 888 contest and the $1,500 contest because I realized the higher stakes contests were a little bit better for me and how I was building teams. I managed to win at Sea Island in November, the $1,500 contest. It only had 67 people because it was a fall event. It paid $50,000, and I took third that day in the 888. So I won 70 grand, and that kind of got this thing started. It took that 15,000 and turned it into 90, and now we were off at that point, basically.
All right, so we'll talk about those golf wins in a second, but I have to talk more about this Third and Schlong head-to-head battle here. So was that the only head-to-head you were playing, or were you playing other contests in addition to that?
It was pretty much just that. And every now and then I would play a night contest if he wasn't around. I was playing, there were a couple other people that I would play occasionally. It was mostly just him. I think I probably played 12 total head-to-head contests during the season, and 8 or 9 were just main slate $2,100 games against him. And it was almost like very structured and very controlled. I knew I was going to play him. And honestly, I began to learn how he would build teams. And, he had so much action that day that my little $2,000 contest was probably just a very small drop in the ocean for what he's building. Playing against him every week, I learned exactly who he liked to play and win and, who he didn't like to play and win. And it kind of made it easy and very predictable. But that's pretty much all I did during college football.
Well, so we talked about that in particular on this show before too, where it can be scary to play against pros and a lot of times not great for your bankroll. But if you find these certain contests or spots where they're overlooking all the details and you can put your focus there, then that's where you can have a pretty big edge against these guys who are entering one lineup into thousands of contests. So, but when you first started though, was that just the first name you saw in the lobby and you picked that name and you played against them, or was that the only one that was available?
I think it was the only one that was available. Maybe there were 2 or 3 and I picked it randomly, but there wasn't a big choice at the $2,000, $5,000 level. Now, once you got down to $500, there were 8 or 9 people to choose from, but he was the only one consistently just listing games there. And I think after I beat him the first time, it was kind of a random choice. And then I said, well, I'll just play this guy again. And then it became funny, right? Because his name's kind of funny. So it was like, well, Third and Schlong, let's go, let's tee it up. And like I said, my buddies just got a big kick out of it. I would tell my wife, well, I'm just taking our mortgage payment here from Schlong again this week, and she get a giant kick out of it, and it just kept going. Eventually, I'm expecting to just get pounded by this guy a couple times in a row, but it just never happened.
That's crazy. Do you think his lineup was that bad, or do you think it was in conjunction with you playing really good lineup, but also knowing what he's going to do?
Yeah, his lineups were bad. It wasn't anything like that. A lot of the games were competitive. There were a couple weeks in a row where I just totally blew the doors off of them, but most of the games were really competitive, and we were picking a lot of the same players. Where I had a little bit of an edge on him, just watched so much ACC football just in my fandom. And I would know there were things like Clemson had a wide receiver named Bo Collins who went to the same high school as DJ Uyangale, right? And as DJ began to struggle during the year and all our receivers got hurt, the only person it felt like he was comfortable throwing the ball to was his former high school teammate. This guy just emerged out of nowhere. And it was fairly well known, like among Clemson folks, that like DJ's only going to throw the ball to Bo, and it looks like he's totally broken. But when he sees his high school teammate, Bo Collins is Min Price getting 15 targets in a game where Clemson's throwing it 24 times, and I've got him. I wouldn't expect anybody to dig that deep and know, but it becomes the slate breaker, right? And in a main slate game, there's just not enough. You get a wide receiver doing that kind of stuff, and there were a couple more opportunities like that with Wake Forest and things like that, and that just kept happening kind of over and over and over. But he was making good lineups. Of course, we'd have the same quarterbacks and a lot of the same players. Just one little tweak here and there.
Yeah, I think, and this is an entirely different topic, but I think there's such value in qualitative data like that, especially in today's day and age where there's so much value on quantitative projections that you can have a pretty big edge, especially in those niche sports like college football or even golf to an extent. So going back to golf, right? You win 70K, the Zozo combined. In February, you win the 19th hole for a 100K. The Masters, you podium finished the 4-4 Mega Milli. Last week, you win the 250K top prize in the flop shot. So an insane run, dude. Talk to me about this heater.
Yeah, it's been nuts, right? So, going back, like I said, to the RSM last year, and then actually took third in the $3,100 contest for the Sony in January as well, which helped the bankroll. There was a third in there at the Valspar in the 3,100. So in addition to the big hits, what's kind of kept me rolling here have been the thirds and the fourths that have just been adding $30,000, $40,000 in my bankroll. And these are contests. What's been interesting about it to me is with the big wins, last week, in addition, I won the Thunderdome and I won the flop shot, and I think I got second in the $3,100 contest. All that would have happened even if Spieth wouldn't have won, and I wouldn't have even had the winner on that lineup. Same thing for the Masters, where I podium finished the Mega Milli. I had Rory and Morikawa who played great in the final round, but I had no Cam Smith whatsoever all week. I had no Scotty Scheffler. I had no Shane Lowry. And those guys were at the top of the leaderboard. Somehow I was still able to be there. And going back to the $100,000, I won at the Phoenix in February in a playoff where Patrick Cantlay and Scotty Scheffler. I had neither of them, which was pretty amazing because Scotty Scheffler was fairly highly owned that week. But I did have Xander Schauffele and Brooks Koepka who finished third and fourth. But it's been interesting to see my approach play out because in a lot of these weeks I haven't been perfect. I haven't had the winner in a lot of my biggest weeks, which, my approach to DFS and golf has always been you're going to need the winner, particularly if you want to win a big contest. If you want to win the flop shot, the idea of winning the flop shot without having the winner in a week where the 6 of 6 was 10 or 11% seems preposterous. But I've kind of proven that a little bit wrong. It's been fun. It's been fun to be there every week, to have a runner in the mix heading to Sunday. Knowing that you've got a 6 of 6 in these big contests where, if you got 130 entrants in the $3,100 contest, maybe 7, 8, 9 people have a 6 of 6 through. You're competing against realistically 4 or 5 people for the big prize, which is, when you get to Saturday morning, it starts to feel really realistic versus, in the bigger contest, the contest with 60,000 entrants or the Millie Makers. You never know until there's 2 holes remaining. But in the smaller contests that are higher stakes, you can kind of plot out your course and realize, okay, this is what needs to happen, and I have a real chance to win this thing. It's been an unbelievable run.
And I think it's a testament to contest selection too, right? In those 100-player, 300-player contests where it's $3,000 buy-in, $800 buy-in, whatever it may be, you don't have to necessarily be perfect. Now the flop shot, for instance, like you mentioned, on Saturday morning, you could wake up and be in third, and you drop to 500th, and then back up to 200th, and then up to 17th, and you drop. So it's crazy runs, but you don't have to be that perfect in those smaller contests. And clearly, you've figured out the best way to approach those types of contests. And what's so amazing to me is that you're able to have this much success while having such a demanding day job. Now, granted, this is a week-long sport, so you have all week to kind of figure out your schedule, but still, you have a demanding day job. Currently, you and your law partner represent 4 men on death row, which is, I mean, that's just a level that I can't even fathom. Why did you pursue a law degree, and why criminal defense in particular? I read a piece that you wrote that you listened to a TED talk that really pushed you into criminal defense, but I'd love to hear just more about that.
Yeah, I was in law school. I went in 2010, and I went to the University of Houston. One of the reasons I came here, in part, was that Houston had everything, right? If you wanted to work in oil and gas, it had that. If you wanted to work in healthcare law, it had that. You want to work for a big corporation, there's tons of them here. But I knew that Houston's kind of ground zero for a lot of criminal defense issues. It's in Texas, where they obviously have their reputation for being pretty harsh. So going in, I didn't know that criminal defense was where I was going to be. I did the normal track where I did the summer associateships at the big firms, doing corporate work. That really just didn't move me. Being representing big, giant corporations, you're never dealing with clients. It was fine. Obviously, the money was going to be good. Didn't feel like a place where I really fit in or that I would fit in long term. I got linked up with a very good professor at University of Houston, who's renowned in the death penalty space. We just began sort of a mentorship relationship. He saw something in me. I really loved his books and his TED Talk. He gives a really nice TED Talk. His name's David Dow, if anybody wants to find him or is interested in this kind of stuff. But he got me interested in this and said, no one at this law school talks about how to go into criminal defense. A lot of people are just going to default into this field because they have nothing else that they can do because they can't work for the big firms. You've got the opportunity to choose. I hope that more people who could work elsewhere will choose to go into this field, and I think you could be that kind of person. And it motivated me to think, well, one, kind of you're looking for edges in DFS, but in the criminal world, one of my edges is that I can look at clients with a straight face and say, a lot of my competition is a criminal lawyer because they had to start their own firm because they couldn't work for someone else. I'm here because I want to be here, and ideally I could have worked for these big firms, and it's given me a bit of an edge. But, at the same time, it's one of the only places in the law world where you get to actually meet real clients, real people. They sit down in your office, they tell you their problems. It's kind of what you think of when you think of lawyering, right? It's people, it's helping them with the biggest thing that's going on in their life, and it's very personal. And at the end of the day, ideally you get to make a difference. It obviously pays well if you do it well. But that's kind of why I got into that. In terms of the death penalty stuff, that I find that I want to do the cases that are the most important and most impactful. The death penalty space is incredibly difficult because no matter how well you do your job, the state is going to kill a handful of your clients. It's just the reality. So it's a tough, it's a tough side of it, but at the same time, a chance to make a big impact.
I mean, a lot to take away from that, and kudos to you for choosing that side because it is so easy to choose that other side, and not many people want to defend those types of people. So I mean, that's impressive. And I have a criminal justice degree. I didn't go to law school, so a lot of what interested me was the criminology aspect of things, and obviously you understand that side. But as you mentioned, I mean, you deal with literal life and death in the courtroom every single day, so I can't imagine that. How do you have enough mental energy to do? In the question here on my paper, I wrote how enough mental energy to also play DFS, but literally enough mental energy to do anything else beyond that.
A lot of times I am pretty tired when I get home, just from the emotional strain of the day. I'm a big fan of my 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock nap before I get up to figure out what to do, because this work will wear on you. My wife would tell stories of how about once every 2 months I'll just kind of I'll go into a little puddle and just question everything about my life and whether or not I want to continue to carry all these burdens. And then she says, "Shut up! You do this every month. You'll be fine in the morning." And I am. I wake up in the morning and we're back at it. But it's just, for me, it's being realistic about. We talk in this field a lot about mental health and your needs and your emotional needs. I have a really good support system around me. But in terms of DFS and kind of having the mental energy, I'm fortunate, and golf is helpful in this way because, like you said, it's a week-long sport. There's an ebb and flow to the preparation you put in for golf DFS. I have a menu of podcasts I listen to mostly to kind of get a grip on where the market is coming down on people, what narratives are forming, whether or not they're smart narratives or not, things that shouldn't be out there that are, maybe little helpful tidbits here and there. A lot of people that I follow are very smart on things like golf course architecture and agronomy and all that stuff that goes into golf. But you can start that process on Monday. And a Texas lawyer, we do a lot of driving. In Houston, I'll go to 4 different counties, sometimes 2 or 3 in one day. I'm in the car 2-3 hours a day. Fortunately, a lot of this stuff I can do as I'm driving. I come home, sometimes I turn on a bath and listen to my podcast at night. I know it's a weird thing to do, but it relaxes me from my day. And now I'm thinking about, whether or not Bubba Watson's going to play well at the Travelers, right?
As most people think about in their baths.
Right. Well, I mean, of course, right? I throw my bath bomb in and got my bubbles, and I'm thinking about Bubba, right? So, I think it gives me sort of a little bit of an escape from the gravity of the work that we're doing, which is helpful. Golf is so insignificant and minor. I also love it and take it super seriously, but who cares, right? Which is nice. Now, it can get a little stressful on the weekends. That's the only issue I have with it is, when you're going hard all day and you have the adrenaline up for trials and hearings, and then, okay, you wake up on Saturday morning and you got the adrenaline back up because you're second in a contest that pays $150,000 or whatever. It's almost like, okay, now your weekend is no longer a break. You're just on full go all weekend. And I try to manage that as well as I can. But as I tell my wife, it's a good problem to have. I'm not up grinding a min cash in this golf stuff. I'll just let that go. But if we got a chance to take home 6 figures in the Masters, well, there's only one way to go after that.
So do you find time to sweat the events for the most part? If you're in it, or even if you're not in it, do you watch all the events?
I watch a lot of golf, and I watch a lot of it passively. I mean, I have it on in my office right now.
I was gonna say, I see the reflection in the back there.
Yeah, the nice thing about owning your own firm is that I've got a TV in my office. I can throw on whatever the heck I want. Now, I'm not watching every shot, and sometimes clients come in and I got to pretend I'm not watching golf, but it'll be on in the background. And Thursdays and Fridays, I tend to schedule my stuff. I try not, if there's a big event that I really want to watch, say the Players is on, I try not to schedule myself in trial. Sometimes it happens. We were set for a big hearing during the Masters, and it got canceled the day before. Thank goodness. But the life of a lawyer, that comes first. But I'm able to watch a lot of golf here and there in a passive way. On the weekends, I'm more serious about watching it. I find that it helps. The same events, same venues every year. There's things that you can glean by watching it, and it's not just sweating it in a gambler sense. I try to pick up whatever I can and hopefully be able to use that information next time this comes around.
A quick pause to let you know that this episode is sponsored by the DFS Daily Newsletter, which you can guess by the name is a daily newsletter that recaps the biggest contests in the DFS industry. Get info on optimal lineups, ownership analysis, and dissection of DFS Pro strategies straight to your inbox every morning. They do great work, and I make sure to read it every single day so I'm caught up on the latest strategies of winning players. So if you're looking for ways to improve your DFS game and even learn about related literature to help you think about DFS differently, then sign up for their newsletter at thedfsdaily.com/signup and follow them on Twitter at DFS_newsletter. Now back to the show. Yeah, and speaking of using information, going back to your play style really quickly, you alluded to it a little bit when talking about your success so far, because you have an insanely aggressive play style, and the DFS Daily Newsletter, who does a great job, they outlined this in their April 18th edition. They went and dissected your player pools. And I'm going to list a couple factors here. I want you to let me know if you think either of these factors or both have any impact on your ability to play properly from a risk reward perspective, because we've had different guests talk about both of these factors. And the first one is first of all, having a day job with legitimate income, that you don't have to ride on every single dollar in your DFS play as your sole income because you have this as your backup, or DFS is so minuscule, like you just said, in the grand scheme of things happening in the courtroom, that who cares what happens with this, right? You can play with the highest risk reward possible just because,
Sure.
in the grand scheme, it doesn't mean much.
Well, I think as to the first point, it makes a big difference. Having a real steady income from a firm, I do well. I'm not a millionaire in my law practice, but, without DFS, I certainly live comfortably. My DFS approach, I try to be about just maximizing potential profit and edge. I don't have to worry about, really anything. Back when I didn't have all the income coming in and I was trying to just use the DFS bankroll to build some sort of life roll, there was a lot of pressure there. It was really hard to it's hard to make the right plays when your concerns are bigger than just what is your edge, what are the where can we get leverage. If you're concerned about losing the money, you sometimes play cautious. And I don't in golf, I think aggression is rewarded. It's very hard to be aggressive if you're trying to go on vacation or pay your bills out of your DFS money. So yeah, I think that has a pretty big impact. The other thing, I guess, I don't know that I ever think about, okay, I can be more aggressive because DFS is less important in the grand scheme of what I do. I do think that allows me, well, I think it allows me to kind of get up and keep doing it and keep putting the pedal down the next week. If let's say I have a losing week or a couple losing weeks in a row, I'm not putting my identity necessarily in my DFS play. So it's not like I feel the need to make changes just to preserve my sense of self, but I'd say the more important part is just understanding that the DFS bankroll is something that I have the opportunity to grow long term, and particularly in golf, I can withstand a lot of the variance that comes in golf because there's so much. Because not only have I built up a nice bankroll in golf, but because I have this income that supports it if I need it to, that I can withstand the variance so that when I do win, I win big, which I think is obviously the goal if you're going to play tournaments. So I do think that has an impact.
Yeah, and you mentioned having the high coming home or during the courtroom, right, during the week. And then if you're high up in a contest, you have that high again on Saturday and Sunday throughout the weekend and just last the whole way. And you didn't, explicitly say this, that you were playing for the action back when you were playing baseball cash and you were doubling your entry fees every single time. But there's always some measure of being an action junkie when you play at high stakes. Do you think that this high stakes aggressive style you have is a way to try to keep up that adrenaline in defending someone's life in court and then coming back home and not having that adrenaline? Or I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you think that your day job is a direct impact on how aggressive and the adrenaline that you're seeking in DFS?
I think it's a sort of correlation rather than causation type thing. I'm the kind of person that if you're going to be an effective criminal defense lawyer, you have to live with a lot of uncertainty. You're setting cases for trial, not knowing what witnesses are going to say exactly, not knowing where juries are going to come down. A first-degree felony here in Texas carries a punishment range of 5 years to 99 years in prison. A lot of room there. So anytime you want to go to trial on a first-degree drug case, you don't know. The jury could give a guy anything. Well, you could win, first of all, which is the ultimate high. If you lose, a jury could give someone probation or they could give them life in prison. So I think if you're going to be effective at my job, my day job, you have to be willing to take risks and put it all out there. And I guess that's kind of my personality. I'm pretty comfortable going for it, right? And really being willing to sort of, as I call it, trust your cape, right? Trust that you have a process in place that's going to make you effective, and that for me, that my clients kind of ride the tailwinds there and trust that I know what I'm doing, because it's their life that we're really risking when we make these decisions. But that's my personality. So I think I'm pretty comfortable really going for it when it comes to DFS, because, one way to explain it too, and I think I just thought of this, and I hadn't really thought of it this way, but you come to realize whenever you're doing the sort of high stakes criminal defense work that there's only so much you can control, and my life has so many serious things in it. Everything matters so much. Sometimes that can lead you to think, well, nothing matters. If in this grand scheme of things, someone's life can just be ruined over having some meth in their pocket, then what are we really doing here? Why don't we go for it when we're playing DFS? I know those are weird things to put together, but it's almost like a throw caution to the wind a little bit. We're not here for very long. Let's go for it and let's try to maximize this thing approach. And some of that comes from my clients who, frankly, I have clients who live that way where, man, I'm just getting arrested all the time, so I'm just going to go for it. I don't mean to say that, I try to adopt their mindset, because a lot of times for them it hasn't been successful. But, with the work that I'm doing, it does, I think, really fuel a risk-taking mindset that you have to get super comfortable with. And that can take away the governor a little bit whenever you're going to play DFS.
I mean, so many things to talk about there, because if I was one of your clients and I needed a defense lawyer, I would want my lawyer to do what you're saying, to take these risks, to do the best possible thing that they can, to have a process that they trust. And I'm sure many of your clients don't see it that way sometimes when you're explaining your strategy and whatnot, or if things don't go their way. And so, but it's easy to see why you're successful in DFS, because I guess a lot of people probably wouldn't put together how being a criminal defense lawyer and playing DFS works and having a similar process, but there is a lot of correlation there. So it makes a ton of sense. And, you mentioned the mental aspect for a little bit. My initial question, again, I'm changing a lot of questions here on the fly, was how do you think you handle the emotional and financial swings of DFS, and are you desensitized because of your day job? But I guess the probably the bigger question is, how do you think you handle the emotional swings of your day job when you're putting all this work in and there are real human lives on the line, and that your decisions can impact how they live the rest of their life or don't live the rest of their life? How do you handle things when it doesn't go your way, when it doesn't go your client's way? And hell, who the hell cares about handling DFS when that's your primary focus?
Yeah, when my clients come into my office to hire me, I give them the spiel from the ethics committee that we can't guarantee them a result, but I tell them I don't take that many clients, and that's the best way to be a lawyer. If you ask me, you have to charge a little more, but everybody gets a lot of attention, and they're going to be kind of a part of my family. I'm going to care about what happens to them. I'm going to take it home at night. They're going to get text messages from me at 11 o'clock because I'm looking at videos, and I have questions about them. They're never going to wonder if I'm working, and all I can control is the process, the amount of work I put in, how I analyze their case, how analytical I am. Because if I wanted a lawyer for my kid, for instance, if he got in trouble, I'd want someone who was smart, who was hardworking, who was analytical as hell, who could look at all the angles and hopefully put them together into a story that makes sense in order to persuade a judge, a jury, a prosecutor to do what we want them to do. And the only thing I can control really is my inputs there. And my clients are usually pretty comfortable with that, right? I've had a lot of success in the criminal defense field, thankfully. And so I can look at them with a straight face and say, I know that the process works. So this is the process. Here's what we're going to do. It's usually a pretty compelling case that I can make for them. And I'm that's what I have to cling to in terms of managing the swings, because otherwise, if you're living and dying with every result, which I will, you've got to have some sort of bedrock there to say, hey, look, I put in as much work as I could have. I looked at every angle. I prepared the argument well. The only thing I wouldn't be okay with is, oh, I was lazy on this case. Oh, I got aggravated with something in this case, therefore I didn't give it my best effort, and now someone's in prison. That's what I couldn't live with. And I think it's a similar thing with DFS, right? If your process is good process, bad result, fine. Bad process, bad result, not fine. And those things are pretty similar. And I think the criminal defense job is more analytical than people think, right? You're taking a lot of inputs, and you're really trying to figure out, what that's going to lead to at a trial. There's 7 different factors. Which one will the jury value? How can you present them? Can you put all these together into one story? It's a bit like, anything else that you do that's analytical, is taking a bunch of inputs and trying to figure out how do they all mesh together. So, I think at the end of the day, the DFS swings, they matter. Money matters, right? I mean, a lot of the clients that I have are in the position they're in part because they have financial devastation, or they've grown up in poverty, or they're desperate, or things like that. So I never want to discount that money is a big part of what we're doing here. So the swings, they do hurt. If I lose $20,000 in a week, I'm not happy about it. But nice for me, I get to go back to work on Monday and invest my time in something very serious, and at least it gets my mind off of the loss, and now we're kind of resetting for a new week.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, right, if bad process, bad results, good process, results. In DFS, right, you can just look at Fantasy Cruncher's lineup study or Fantasy Labs contest dashboard, whatever other, and you can check your process. No such thing in the courtroom, right? You can't go back and so, I mean, are you ever second guessing yourself on your process, or like, damn, if I'd done this, maybe this would have happened?
Yeah, we try to kind of do a little bit of self-scouting in that way, pretty detailed notes on different kinds of cases. And I try to learn something from every one of them. I've been very fortunate, like I said, that I haven't had many clients go to jail or prison here recently. So it's been, talk to me in 2 or 3 years if I have a really bad run, and maybe the answer is different. But the emotional lows haven't been so bad recently. But we try to look at every case and figure out, like, God, what did we miss there? Is there something we could have done better? And that's, if you're not doing that, I don't care what profession you're in, you're kind of missing an opportunity. And I don't think it's fair to your practice if you don't do that.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, your passion for this and your preparation shines through in this interview. And for the people out there listening who don't believe it, and it's like, oh, he's a lawyer. Of course, he's going to say those types of things. I encourage you to go read some of Coby's pieces that he's written on Medium, talks about some of his cases, some of the clients he's worked with. I mean, that passion shines through. So I just wanted to give you a shout out there, Coby, because clearly you care about what you do.
I appreciate that.
So, all right, let's just talk about family life really quickly, and then I'll let you get out of here because you are married, and you've mentioned her a couple times being your rock and supporting you, whether it's in the criminal courtroom or whatever it may be. How does your job and DFS play fit into her schedule, and how does she manage all of that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. She is, in the beginning, she was kind of cautiously supportive. It was sort of like, okay, I know you self-excluded and you had good reasons for it. Are you sure that you're in a good place to hop back in? And we had those conversations. I said, yeah, and she kind of likes the golf thing because she doesn't care what I do at noon on a Saturday or at 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. She didn't like I said, the Friday nights at 10 o'clock where I'm sweating the Diamondbacks and Dodgers, right? That was, that didn't fit into her schedule very well. But she likes golf as well. She's learned. She tells me I don't want to know about any of your lineups until Sunday at about 3 o'clock, which is probably a healthy way to handle golf. But then when she sits down and she figures out who we're rooting for, really, really into it, I'll look over at her and there'll be a wry smile every now and then because she knows, like, oh, that was a big putt, wasn't it? And I'm like, nice. Yeah, that was a big putt. Like last week, Spieth makes 2 eagles in the first 5 holes. After the second one goes in, she kind of looked and went, I think I remember that eagles are a lot of points. I was like, yes, you do remember that. So she's kind of gotten into it, which has been fun. But she's a good sort of grounding force for me that, this is the run I've been on here in terms of financially. I mean, it's changed some things, right, about the freedom and what we can do. Money does that, how we can live our life or what our plans are going to be in the future. And so she's a nice person to have there as sort of a reminder that, hey, this is all real. This money here equals houses and, children, stuff for children and support for family members and flying your parents out here for Mother's Day and practical, real things that we do with the money rather than it just being a theoretical reflection of you winning. So she's a good reminder of that. And so I think it's been really, really, really healthy. Our kind of our shared understanding of the golf DFS.
That's huge to have someone like that on your side. And, I've mentioned it many times on this show, how important that is and how lucky most people are to have that kind of partner in their life. So I'm very lucky for you, Coby. Let me ask you about your friends and family, just what they think of not only your DFS play, what do they know about it, first of all, and what do they think of it? But then also, what do they know and think about your day job? Because I can't imagine a lot of people can fully relate. Because the question I ask to most guests is they can't relate to the life of a DFS player, but I can't imagine most people can relate to the life of a high stakes criminal defense lawyer. So I'm just curious what your friends and family know and think about your lifestyle.
Yeah. So, obviously my wife, I went over that. When I hit a big one, I have a lot of golf friends. So I discuss golf fantasy with them. They ask me for picks and things like that. So they're fairly aware of how I'm doing this. And everybody's just kind of excited for the success. In terms of family, though, my mom, she's funny. She loves sports, big sports lover, and will watch games that with me, back when I was at home years ago. But now she wants to know who I've picked so she can watch it and she can root on. We've kind of been through this together as a kid. I would enter. I've always loved contests. In my little small hometown, we had a bowl pool that had 500 people. And it was $20 to enter, and the winner would win $7,000 or $8,000, whatever. When I was 8 years old, I would enter that and try to figure out who everybody was going to be picking so I could be contrarian, and I came in third and won $2,000 and I'm 8, right? It really wasn't that hard. You're just picking things. But I thought to myself, well, all the rednecks here are big Gamecock fans, so they're going to pick the Gamecocks to beat Florida State. So maybe I'll pick Florida State, and I hate the Gamecocks anyway, so that's good for me.
Even better. Dude,
right.
That's a ton of video games, by the way. $2,000 at 8 years old.
Hey, that's right. Well, God, I don't know I don't even know what I did with that money. But my mom was sort of a part of that. So she's kind of, it's been fun to watch her, and she's blown away by the amount of money. My parents weren't particularly wealthy. They're just okay. They're working people, working class people. So she tries to remind me and keep me grounded. Like, hey, you've just won, 12 years of my pay in the last 2 weeks. Please be a good steward of this money. And when your mom tells you something like that, it resonates. I mean, it has to. And I say, I thank you. Thank you for telling me that. I appreciate your perspective, so that I'm not getting silly here, and not getting wasteful or so forth. So, and my dad, obviously, very proud. He's a typical dad. He wants to continue reminding me that this is not just good luck. That you are here for a reason. You have always been good at math. He's doing the dad thing. It's very supportive. So they've been great about this, and it's cool that I've been able to just kind of share some of this with them and have them see it as a very positive thing.
Again, and not a lot of people have that. We mentioned not a lot of people have the partner to support them. Not a lot of people have parents to support them. So clearly lucky there, and also very clearly that they helped you get to where you are today. So, Coby, I'll let you get out of here. I'll let you sweat the rest of this golf event today, and we'll talk about some final advice for people out there listening. So, what do you think is the most important skill to have in being a high stakes DFS player?
Sure. I think it's to figure out what your edge is. Like, what is your why? Like, why do you think you can be successful in a given sport or a different contest? For me, in golf, I think I figured out a pretty simple formula for winning money, and that is the best way to win in golf. And golf is so unique to other sports in that we have the cut in golf, right? In football, there's nothing that's going to knock two players out of everyone's lineup after 2 quarters. But in golf, that happens. So the best way to win money is to have a 6 of 6 in a week where there is a low 6 of 6 percentage. And the only way for me to do that is to really avoid high-owned players, because if you have high-owned players, the only way for you to have a 6 of 6 is generally for a lot of other people to have a 6 of 6 too. So I view leverage as being very important. So I tell people all the time, if you're going to do DFS, you need to be understanding the market and leverage just as much as you're understanding numbers and projections. You need to understand that having a high-owned player is an opportunity cost, particularly in golf, because that costs you the opportunity to have leverage if that player misses the cut. Just have a firm understanding that the game you are playing is not just about picking the best players or necessarily the best values. It's also about opportunities when those good values bomb out. And obviously golf's different, like I said, with the cut, but other sports are similar. And I've heard other high stakes DFS players talk about that in what they do with baseball and basketball and football. And the other thing I think is just to bankroll management is obviously so important, and anybody will tell you. And my story is obviously
definitely do what you did early on. That's the key to bankroll management. Double up every single day.
Well, the problem with it is, you're going to lose eventually, right? So if you're not managing your bankroll, my dad always told me, winning is not the problem you have. It's holding on to the money. If you're betting 20% of your bankroll and everything, it doesn't, that you're not going to be able to sustain the variance that's going to come. You want to make sure that your bankroll can live long enough to exploit whatever edge you have. If you don't have an edge, then you're going to lose anyway. But if you have an edge, make sure you're smart enough with your bankroll that you can realize that edge, right? And I think people need to think more about that, and they could have more success.
Very good point. Very good takeaway. And finally, a lot of people listen to this are not pros. They have a day job. So for someone who wants to play DFS seriously while having a day job, what would be your advice?
Make sure you're in a job that allows you to do that. I think if you're working under the thumb of someone who is going to be very controlling, DFS can be damaging. If you're not in a position where you can invest the right amount of time, you're not going to be successful at DFS, and you're also going to take away from what you're doing at your job. But what I find, if you're in a situation like that, whether you control your own schedule or not, it's a lot easier if you do. But if you don't, you're going to have to be very disciplined about segmenting your time, kind of like I do. I'm able to do whatever I want, but still, I find that I'll listen to what I need to listen to while I'm on the road. I have my 2 hours on Tuesday night that I got to go through and read a lot of Twitter and build a lot of lineups and things of that nature. You're going to have to be very disciplined about using your time and segmenting your time. You need to settle in too. I mean, this is really 2 jobs. If you want to play DFS seriously and have a job, you're working 2 jobs. You're like the guy who goes to work and then is a bartender at night. It's not going to be easy. Set your expectations that you're going to work a lot of hours if you want to have success. And that way, when you're doing it, you can think to yourself, okay, there's a payoff at the end of this. Just like the person working 2 jobs thinks, well, I'm going to have a little extra money in the bank at the end of the day. So, I guess that would be my advice.
Fantastic stuff, Coby. I appreciate you, man. This was a very enlightening interview. So I'll give you the floor. If there's anything we haven't talked about, anything you want to promote, anything else you want to discuss, now's your time.
Yeah, sure. Look, I mean, you can find me on Twitter, I guess, at DuBose Defense. I am a full-time lawyer in addition to this. So if you're following me, you might get some lawyer takes in addition to the golf takes. But I just appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. This has been a really fun run. I do want to shout out the Tour Junkies. I spent a lot of time in the Discord there with a lot of really, really good people who care a lot about golf, and they've been an important part of my process. A lot of the posters, or I guess the members in there that share their insights every week. So, I guess it's another piece of advice that I'd give. If you're starting out at this and you want to be successful, find you a good community of people that you can learn from. There's a lot of good people in this industry, in the fantasy industry, that are willing to share what they know. Talk to them, ask questions, and be a part of that community, and people will help you out. So I hope people will take that to heart.
Having a community is so key. We've heard so many other guests talk about that as well. So, Coby, I appreciate your time, man. I'll let you get back to the sweating of golf. Appreciate your time. And everyone out there, we appreciate you listening. Thank you.
Thank you, pal.